Hey, my name is Ethan. I'm 29. 3 months ago, I moved into a luxury building I couldn't afford, on something called an artist discount. And the first time I went to rooftop yoga, the instructor stood behind me, adjusted my hips, and whispered, "You need help with your balance." I panicked and said, "Hold me then." She laughed, this real startled laugh, and I smelled citrus and eucalyptus and heard her gold bangles clink as her hand steadied me. Then I found out she was 44, married, and owned the building, and her husband was the one funding my rent. If you're watching this right now, tell me where you're from in the comments, because I still don't know if what we did was wrong. I still go up there sometimes. Early morning, before anyone else, before the sun turns the city glass into something sharp and too bright. I unlock the rooftop door with the code she gave me months ago, the one that's supposed to be for dedicated members only, and I roll out my mat by the window. The same spot, every time. The studio smells like citrus and eucalyptus from the diffuser that runs 24 hours. The floor is polished wood, slightly sticky under my bare feet, and when I move the mat into position, it makes this soft thud squeak sound that I've memorized. Outside, the HVAC hum blends with distant sirens, and if I close my eyes, I can almost hear her voice cutting through it all, telling me to breathe deeper, stand taller, stop thinking so much. I start a balance pose. Tree, I think it's called. 1 foot against my thigh, hands pressed together at my chest. I wobble after 3 seconds and have to put my foot down. I was never good at this without her. There's a class schedule printed on the wall near the door, laminated and professional. Her name is still there. Dr. Amara Cole, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8 a.m., Saturdays at sunset. Private sessions by appointment. I traced those letters with my eyes this morning, like I do every time I come up here alone, and wondered if she ever thinks about that night during the storm. The one where we sat back to back on the floor with the rain hammering the windows, and didn't say a word for almost an hour because words would have made it real. I almost moved out after everything happened, almost lost my lease, almost convinced myself I could live somewhere cheaper, somewhere that didn't smell like her perfume in every elevator ride. But I didn't. Things between us didn't end. They just frayed, stretched thin but never snapped. I roll up my mat now, check my phone out of habit. No messages. It's 6:47 a.m., and the building is still mostly asleep. And as I walk toward the elevator, my eyes catch on the studio door handle one more time. That's where it all started. Not the handle itself, but what it represented. Who owned it? Let me go back. I moved into this building on a Tuesday afternoon in late summer, sweating through my shirt, hauling cardboard boxes out of a rideshare trunk while people in designer athleisure walked past me into the marble lobby. The place was called something ridiculous, the Meridian or the Pinnacle. One of those names that tells you the rent is 4 times what you can afford. But I wasn't paying full price. I had an artist discount. The woman at the front desk, Lena, explained it to me while I signed forms and tried not to drip sweat on the counter. She was maybe 35, Latina, with sharp eyeliner and the kind of smile that said she'd seen every type of tenant come through those doors. "So you're our token starving creative," she said, not meanly, just matter of fact. "Graphic designer," I said, "and part-time barista. So, yeah." She laughed. "You'll fit right in. Just don't throw any wild parties or blast music after 10. The discount program has rules." "What kind of rules?" "Behavioral expectations, community participation, wellness amenities." She slid a glossy brochure across the counter. "The building has a whole wellness brand. Dr. Amara Cole runs it. She's kind of our in-house celebrity." I glanced at the brochure. A black woman in elegant yoga clothes stood on a rooftop with the city skyline behind her, arms raised, face serene. The tagline said something about balance inside and out. "She teaches classes up there," Lena continued. "Yoga, meditation, that kind of thing. You should go. Part of your lease agreement is participating in community programs." I nodded like I understood, even though I didn't really. All I cared about was getting upstairs and figuring out if my mattress would fit through the door. The elevator ride to the 7th floor felt like stepping into a different tax bracket. Brushed metal. Soft lighting. Tiny cameras in the corners that I pretended not to notice. My reflection looked anxious and out of place. When the doors opened, I passed an older white woman's apartment. Her door was cracked open and I saw her face peek out, curious and sharp. She was maybe 60, with the kind of haircut that costs more than my phone bill. "Welcome to the building," she said, in a voice that didn't quite sound welcoming. "Thanks," I said, and kept walking. My apartment was at the end of the hall. 7th floor, Unit 712, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchenette that barely fit a microwave. The windows faced east, and the view was decent if you ignored the HVAC units on the next building over. I unpacked enough to make a bed and set up my laptop on a folding table. Checked my email. There was a message from building management confirming my lease and reminding me that my rent discount was contingent upon adherence to community standards and active participation in wellness initiatives. I scrolled to the bottom of the email, where it listed the building's key investors and partners. Marcus Cole, MD, orthopedic surgeon. Primary funder of the artist discount program through his clinic. I clicked on his name and a photo loaded. A black man, maybe late 40s, good-looking in a polished way. Expensive watch. Confident smile. Standing next to the same woman from the brochure at some charity gala, Dr. Amara Cole. They looked perfect together, the kind of couple that shows up in lifestyle magazines. I closed the email and made instant ramen in the microwave, eating it sitting on the floor because I hadn't unpacked any chairs yet. My phone buzzed with a notification from the building's app. Rooftop yoga with Dr. Amara Cole. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. I hesitated, then clicked register. If I was going to live here, I might as well pretend I belonged. I woke up late the next morning and almost didn't go, but something made me get up, brush my teeth, throw on old gym clothes that didn't match, and ride the elevator up to the rooftop with a cheap water bottle in my hand. The other people in the elevator with me looked like they'd stepped out of athleisure catalogs. Matching sets, expensive yoga mats, hair that looked professionally messy. I felt like a kid wearing his dad's suit to a wedding. The rooftop was beautiful, I'll give it that. Glass walls, polished wood floors, the whole city spread out below us. The early light made everything glow. And there was this smell. Citrus and eucalyptus, sharp and clean, coming from a diffuser near the door. Mats were already laid out in neat rows. I grabbed one from the stack by the entrance and found a spot near the back, trying to be invisible. That's when I saw her. Dr. Amara Cole stood at the front of the room in simple black leggings and a fitted tank top, gold bangles on her wrists, hair pulled back in a low bun. She was talking quietly to a couple of regulars, laughing at something one of them said. And when she moved, there was this ease to her. Like she owned every inch of that space, which I guess she did. She looked older than in the photos. Not in a bad way. Just real. There were lines at the corners of her eyes when she smiled, and her shoulders had a slight tiredness to them, even though her posture was perfect. "Good morning, everyone," she said, and her voice cut through the low hum of conversation. Calm. Warm. The kind of voice that makes you want to listen. "Let's start with our breath." I tried to follow along. I really did. But I was terrible. Wobbling in every pose, losing my balance, sneaking glances at the people around me to figure out what I was supposed to be doing. The mat was sticky under my feet in a way that felt wrong, and I kept thinking about how stupid I must look. At one point, I almost knocked into the guy next to me when I tipped out of a standing pose. Amara glanced at me and smiled. Not mocking, just noticing. "Don't worry," she said, loud enough for the class to hear, but somehow aimed at me. "Balance takes practice. I'll help you next time." Her eyes held mine for a second longer than necessary, and something in my chest tightened. I told myself it was just embarrassment. Near the end of class, during the final pose, she walked over to me. I felt her presence behind me before I heard her voice. "May I?" she asked quietly. I nodded, not sure what she meant. Her hands touched my hips, adjusting my stance. Her bangles made a soft clinking sound. She was close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something light and expensive. Her fingers pressed gently at my lower back, straightening my spine. "You need help with your balance," she said, half technical, half something else. And I don't know what made me say it. Nerves, maybe, or stupidity. "Hold me then," I whispered. She laughed. Actually laughed, startled and real, breaking through that calm instructor mask for just a second. Our eyes met in the mirror at the front of the studio. That's when I noticed the man standing in the doorway. He was wearing scrubs, expensive ones. His arms were crossed and he was watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not angry, just aware. Amara straightened up immediately, stepping back from me. Her professionalism snapped into place like a door closing. "Everyone," she said, addressing the class. "This is my husband, Marcus. He's the reason we have this beautiful space." A few people clapped politely. Marcus smiled and waved, then said something to Amara I couldn't hear. I stayed very still, suddenly hyper-aware of how close I'd just been to her. After class, as people rolled up their mats and filtered toward the elevator, I heard Marcus talking to her near the door. "Your new fan seems dedicated," he said, voice light but pointed. She laughed it off, but I caught the way her shoulders tensed. I left quickly, not making eye contact with anyone. In the elevator ride down, 2 women stood next to me, chatting. "They're such a perfect couple," one of them said. "We're so lucky to have them in the building." The other agreed. "I know. And Dr. Cole is just goals, you know?" I stared at my reflection in the metal doors and thought about my stupid joke. The woman who'd just adjusted my pose wasn't just a yoga instructor. She was my landlord's wife. That afternoon, I sat in my apartment, still sweaty from class, and checked my email. There was a new message from building management. Subject line: Lease Addendum Review. I opened it. It was a reminder to review the conduct clauses in my artist discount agreement, specifically the sections about maintaining appropriate relationships with ownership, staff, and amenity providers. I clicked through to the full contract and started reading. The discount program was funded primarily by Marcus Cole's orthopedic clinic. His name was all over the paperwork. There were clauses about no conflicts of interest and professional boundaries and behavioral standards befitting the building's reputation. I closed my laptop and stared at the wall. Nothing had happened. Just a dumb joke. A brief touch during a yoga class. But the weight of that contract sat in my chest like a stone. That night, I texted my friend Gabe, who I used to live with before I got this place. Me. "So my yoga instructor is also basically my landlord. That's fine, right?" Gabe. "LMAO, dude, are you serious?" Gabe. "Is she hot?" Me. "That's not the point." Gabe. That's definitely the point. Gabe, stay away from rich people's wives, bro. I put my phone down and didn't reply. I almost didn't go back to class the next morning. But I did. This time I chose a mat in the back corner, as far from the front as possible. I kept my head down and focused on not falling over. Amara taught the class the same way she had before. Calm, professional, encouraging. She adjusted other people's poses but didn't come near me, which somehow felt worse. After class, as people were leaving, I lingered by my mat, rolling it up slowly. She was near the door, thanking people as they filed out. When it was just the two of us left, she walked over. "You came back," she said. "Most people don't after a rough first class." "I'm stubborn," I said. She smiled. "What do you do? For work, I mean." "Graphic design, freelance, and I work at a coffee shop part-time to, actually pay rent." Her expression flickered. "You're in the artist program." It wasn't a question. "Yeah." She nodded slowly, and I could see her putting pieces together. She knew what that meant. She knew who funded it. "Well," she said after a pause, "if you want to keep coming, I'm glad to have you. Your balance will improve with practice." "Thanks." She started to walk away, then stopped. "Actually, I noticed you hold a lot of tension in your back. Anxiety can show up in the body like that. If you want, I could book you for a private session, just to work on alignment and help you feel more grounded." I should have said no. I should have thanked her and walked away, and stuck to group classes where there were 15 other people in the room. "Yeah," I said instead. "That would be good." She pulled out her phone. "I'll send you some times through the app." That night, lying in bed, I got the notification. Private session with Dr. Amara Cole. 2 days from now, 6 p.m. I confirmed it before I could overthink it. 2 days later, I stood outside the studio at 5:55 p.m., hands shaking slightly, telling myself this was just yoga. The rooftop was quieter at this hour. No group class, just the hum of the HVAC and the city noise below. The diffuser was running and the lights were dimmed lower than usual, giving everything a softer glow. Amara was already inside, setting up mats. "Thanks for coming," she said when I walked in. "We'll go slower today. Focus on your breathing and balance. No pressure." We started with simple breathing exercises. She told me to close my eyes, inhale through my nose, exhale through my mouth. Her voice was steady and calm, and somehow it actually worked. My heart rate slowed. My shoulders dropped. Then we moved into poses. She adjusted me the way she had, in group class, but slower, more deliberate. Her hands on my back, my shoulders, my hips. Gentle pressure to straighten my spine, shift my weight, open my chest. And we talked. Not about yoga, about life. I told her about my panic attacks, about feeling like an imposter in this building, surrounded by people who had their shit together in ways I couldn't imagine, about freelancing and the constant fear that the work would dry up. She listened in a way that felt different from regular conversation. Therapist mode, maybe. But also something softer. "I work with a lot of high-achieving clients," she said quietly, adjusting my arm in a stretch. "And most of them feel exactly like you do. Like they're faking it. Like someone's going to realize they don't belong." "Do you ever feel that way?" I asked. Her hands paused on my shoulder blade. "More than you'd think." We held the stretch in silence, her fingertips warm against my back, the studio air cool on my skin. After the session, as I was gathering my things, she walked me to the door. "You're not as unbalanced as you think," she said, and there was something almost personal in the way she said it. I stepped into the hallway and turned back to thank her one more time. That's when I saw it. On the wall next to the studio entrance, there was a plaque, brushed metal, engraved letters. It listed the building's founding partners. At the very top, Marcus and Amara Cole. Below that, the logo for Marcus's clinic. The same one on my lease, and suddenly I understood. My yoga instructor, my landlord's wife, the woman whose hands had just been on my back. She wasn't just part of the building. She owned it. I walked back to my apartment in a daze, passed through the lobby where Lena was at the desk, talking on the phone, past a framed photo wall showing the Coles at charity events, gala dinners, ribbon cuttings, past Mrs. Hawthorne's door, which was cracked open like always, her sharp eyes watching. In my apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at nothing. Lena had said it weeks ago. The Coles were hands-on. They watched everything, the programs, the leases, the cameras in the elevators and hallways, and probably the rooftop too. If I looked like I was crossing a line with Amara, even an emotional one, I could lose this place, lose my discount, lose my work referrals. But it was more than that. I kept thinking about her hands on my back, her voice telling me to breathe, the way she'd listened to me talk about panic attacks and imposter syndrome like it mattered, the way I already wanted to see her again. I tried to work that night, opened my laptop and stared at a half-finished design project and couldn't focus. My phone buzzed with a notification from the yoga app. A note from Amara in my session log. Good work today. Remember to practice grounding techniques. You're stronger than you think. AC. I read it 3 times. Late that night, after I'd turned off all the lights and gotten into bed, I heard faint music through the ceiling, a playlist I recognized from the studio. Soft instrumental. The kind she played during cool-down stretches. She was up there, alone, practicing above me while I lay here thinking about her. I whispered to myself that this couldn't become anything more, and I knew, even as I said it, that it already had. Over the next couple of weeks, something shifted. Not all at once, just gradually, like ice melting so slowly you don't notice until the glass is half empty. I kept going to group classes, twice a week, sometimes 3 times, and every time I walked into that studio, Amara would glance up from whatever she was doing and give me this small nod. Not special, not obvious, just acknowledgement. But it felt like more. I started showing up with iced coffee some mornings. Not for her, technically. Just for myself. But I'd set it down near the front desk and she'd see it, and sometimes she'd smile and say, "You're going to be too wired to balance." And I'd say, "Probably." And that would be it. Small things. Stupid things. But they added up. She started saving the mat by the window for me. Never said anything about it. Just, it was always there when I arrived. And I'd set up in that spot, and the light would hit the floor in this particular way, and I could see her reflection in the glass when she demonstrated poses at the front of the room. After classes, we'd linger. Not long. Just a few extra minutes while other people filed out. She'd ask how my work was going. I'd ask how her week was. We traded music recommendations. She sent me a playlist once through the app called Grounding, and I listened to it on repeat for 3 days. We texted sometimes. Never about anything important, just small check-ins, tips for dealing with anxiety, funny observations about building residence. Once she sent me a photo of a coffee cup with terrible latte art and said, "Your barista skills are safe." I sent back a laughing emoji and then stared at the conversation thread for 10 minutes, wondering if I was reading too much into everything. Probably. Definitely. But I couldn't stop. Gabe came to visit on a Saturday afternoon in early fall. He showed up at my door with beer and pizza, looking around my apartment with the kind of curiosity that comes from someone who knew you when you had second-hand furniture and couldn't afford groceries. "This place is nice," he said, almost suspicious. Like, actually nice. Artist discount, I reminded him. Right, the yoga landlord thing. He grinned. Speaking of which, you still going to those classes? Yeah. We should go to one. I want to see what all the fuss is about. I should have said no, but I didn't. So the next morning, Sunday, Gabe came with me to the 9 a.m. class. He made jokes the whole elevator ride up, about rich people and their wellness journeys, and how he was going to be terrible at this. I laughed along, but my stomach was tight. Amara was already in the studio when we walked in. She looked up, saw me with someone new, and her expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or something else. This is my friend Gabe, I said too quickly. He wanted to try a class. Welcome, Gabe, she said smoothly. First time? Yeah, go easy on me. She smiled. I always do. The class was normal. Fine. She taught the way she always did, walking between mats, adjusting people, offering encouragement. But I noticed things. The way her eyes found mine more often than usual. The way she adjusted my shoulder during a side stretch, her hand resting there just a second longer than it needed to. The way she laughed at something I said when I almost tipped over, and it sounded too warm, too familiar. Gabe noticed, too. I could tell by the way he looked at me when we left the studio. Not saying anything, just looking. We grabbed coffee at a shop down the block and sat outside, and for a while we talked about normal stuff. His job, my freelance work, the city. Then he said, So what? The yoga teacher. I kept my eyes on my coffee. What about her? Dude. Gabe leaned forward. She was all over you in there. She was adjusting my pose. That's literally her job. Nah, I saw how she looked at you, and how you looked at her. He paused. Isn't she married? To your landlord? Her husband co-owns the building, yeah. Jesus Christ, Ethan. Nothing's happening, I said, and I almost believed it. Gabe shook his head. You're playing with fire. Rich people protect themselves first. If anything goes sideways, you're the one who gets burned. Not her. I know that. Do you? I didn't answer. He sighed. Look, I'm not saying don't live your life, but be smart. People notice things. And it seems like you're not being subtle. He was right. I knew he was right. But walking back to the building later that afternoon, I couldn't stop replaying the way Amara's hand had felt on my shoulder. The warmth of it. The weight. When I got to my floor, Mrs. Hawthorne was on her balcony, smoking a thin cigarette. She called down to me as I passed. You're up on that roof a lot lately. I looked up. Just trying to get healthier. She smiled, slow and knowing. Good for you. I went inside and locked the door behind me. The next week passed in the same rhythm. Classes, coffee, small conversations, careful distance. But then the weather changed. A storm rolled in on a Wednesday evening. Heavy rain, thunder, the kind of weather that makes you want to stay inside and do nothing. I got a notification on my phone around 6 p.m. Group class canceled due to weather and safety concerns. I felt stupidly disappointed. I heated up leftover pasta and sat on my couch, listening to the rain hammer against the windows, scrolling through my phone without really seeing anything. Then, at 8:47 p.m., a new message appeared. From Amara's Instructor account. If you still need quiet, I'll be in the studio tonight. Door will be open for you around 9. I stared at the screen. Read it 3 times. Looked out my window at the storm. Thought about Marcus and cameras and lease agreements and everything Gabe had said. Then I stood up, changed into workout clothes, grabbed my mat, and walked toward the elevator. The rooftop hallway was empty when I arrived. Just me and the low night mode lighting and the sound of rain against glass. The studio door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. Only the salt lamps were on. Dim orange glow. The diffuser hummed in the corner, filling the air with that familiar citrus eucalyptus scent. Rain lashed the windows, turning the city lights into blurred streaks. Amara sat on a mat near the center of the room, legs crossed, wearing loose sweatpants and an oversized hoodie. No makeup. Hair down and slightly damp, like she'd just showered. This was the least polished I'd ever seen her. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey. Sorry about the canceled class. I know some people were counting on it." "It's just rain," I said. She smiled. "Want some tea before we start?" We didn't do yoga right away. We sat cross-legged on the floor, mugs of herbal tea warming our hands, listening to the storm. The conversation flowed easier than it ever had before. Maybe because it was late. Maybe because we were alone. Maybe because the storm made everything feel separated from the rest of the world. She told me about her stepdaughter moving out for college, about how the guest room felt too empty now, about clients who treated her like a life coach but never actually changed anything, about feeling like a set piece in her own life sometimes. I told her about avoiding relationships because I was tired of being someone's backup plan, about freelancing and the constant fear of not being good enough, about moving into this building and feeling like I was wearing a costume. "You're not wearing a costume," she said quietly. "You belong here as much as anyone." "Do I?" She held my eyes. "Yeah, you do." We eventually moved into poses. Slow ones, balance work. She stood close, guiding my arms, adjusting my spine. At one point I held her wrists lightly to steady myself, and we were face to face, just inches apart, and the lights flickered from the storm. Neither of us moved. Her breath was soft and even. Her eyes were dark and tired and beautiful. Then she stepped back. "Good. That's good. Let's try the next one." We kept going until we were both exhausted. Not from the physical work, from everything else. After we sat on the floor again, backs against the same wall, feet stretched out toward the center of the room. Not talking, just existing in the same space while the rain pounded the windows and the city hummed below us. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Long enough for my tea to go cold, long enough for me to memorize the sound of her breathing. When I finally stood to leave, she stayed seated, mug in her hands, eyes on the rain. "Thanks for coming," she said. "Thanks for inviting me." I walked to the door, put my hand on the handle, almost turned around. But I didn't. I left her there, alone in the dim studio, and rode the elevator down to my floor with my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. After that night, things got easier and harder at the same time. Easier because we'd crossed some invisible line of honesty. We knew what this was, even if we didn't say it out loud. The charged silences, the long looks, the way small touches felt enormous. Harder because now we both knew, and knowing made it dangerous. We fell into a routine. Group classes. Private sessions once a week, usually late evening. Coffee drop-offs in the morning. Texts about nothing important that felt important anyway. She saved my mat spot. I learned which days she taught so I could plan my work schedule around them. Lena noticed. I could tell by the way she'd smile when I walked through the lobby heading toward the rooftop. Not judgmental, just aware. Mrs. Hawthorne definitely noticed. She made comments in the elevator, little digs wrapped in politeness. "You're certainly dedicated to that wellness program. Dr. Cole must be an excellent teacher." I laughed them off. But they stuck. One Friday evening, Marcus showed up at the studio during a private session. I was mid-pose when the door opened. Amara was behind me, hands on my shoulders, adjusting my alignment. We both froze. "Hey, babe," Marcus said, walking in with a tablet in his hand. Didn't mean to interrupt, just checking camera feeds. We've had increased after-hours usage lately. He glanced at me, smiled. You're Ethan, right? Artist program? Yeah. Good stuff. We like supporting creative tenants. As long as everyone keeps their noses clean, you know? He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The clinic invests a lot in this building. We want to make sure it stays professional. Amara stepped away from me. We were just finishing up. No rush. Marcus tapped something on his tablet. I'll be in the office if you need me. He left. The door clicked shut behind him. Amara didn't look at me. She walked to the front of the room and started adjusting mats that didn't need adjusting. We should wrap up, she said quietly. Okay. We finished the session in silence. No small talk, no lingering by the door. She thanked me politely, professionally, like I was any other student. When I got back to my apartment, I had an email. From the studio, automated. All my private sessions had been canceled. Due to schedule changes. There was a link to book group classes instead. No personal message, no explanation. I sat on my bed and stared at the screen for a long time. I drafted a text to her. Did I do something wrong? Deleted it, tried again. Are you okay? Deleted that, too. I didn't send anything. The next 2 weeks were hell. I kept going to group classes because not going felt like admitting something. But everything was different. Amara barely looked at me. When she did, it was brief, professional, distant. She called me Mr. Ward again, like we'd reset to the beginning. She adjusted other students' poses but didn't touch me. She smiled at everyone else, but not at me. I felt like furniture, something she used to notice and now just stepped around. My work suffered. I missed deadlines. A client emailed asking if I was okay. I lied and said I was fine. Lena asked me if everything was all right one morning in the lobby. I gave her the same lie. Gabe texted, asking how things were going. I didn't reply. I started refreshing the yoga app obsessively, checking for private session availability. There was none. At least not for me. One night after a particularly bad group class where Amara didn't make eye contact once, I stayed behind after everyone else left, hoping she'd say something. Explain. Acknowledge that things had changed. She just thanked me for coming, then walked past me into the studio office and closed the door softly behind her. I stood there alone in the empty studio, staring at my reflection in the windows, feeling pathetic. Then I switched off the lights and left. Mrs. Hawthorne cornered me in the laundry room a few days later. You seem tense lately, she said, folding towels with methodical precision. Just work stress. She smiled. I remember during that storm a few weeks ago. I saw you heading up to the rooftop late, with classes canceled and all. You and Dr. Cole must have had a private session. My chest tightened. It was just a makeup class. Of course. Her eyes glinted. Though I will say, you two looked awfully comfortable, from what I could see through the glass. I didn't respond. Marcus is very protective, you know, she continued, of his investments, his reputation, his wife. She paused. Buildings like this don't like complications. I grabbed my laundry and left without saying anything else. Back in my apartment, I opened my lease folder on my laptop, reread the behavioral clauses, the conflict of interest warnings, the professional boundaries requirements. I started drafting an email to building management. Subject: regarding my tenancy. I'm writing to inquire about voluntarily ending my lease at the end of the current cycle. I stared at the half-written email for an hour. Thought about packing up, finding a cheaper place, never seeing Amara in that studio again. never hearing her voice telling me to breathe deeper, never feeling her hands steadying my balance. I thought about living somewhere that didn't smell like citrus and eucalyptus. I closed the laptop without sending it. 2 nights later, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at my phone. 1:58 a.m. Above me, I could hear faint music. The same playlist from the storm night. She was up there. Alone again. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. 1 text. Studio door is unlocked. If you still need help with your balance. My heart stopped. I sat up. Read it again. Checked the time. 2:03 a.m. This was a terrible idea. This was the kind of idea that ends with me losing my apartment and her losing everything. I thought about cameras. Marcus, Mrs. Hawthorne, the contract in my laptop. Then I got out of bed, threw on sweatpants and a hoodie, grabbed my mat, stepped into the hallway, empty, silent, pressed the elevator button. The ride up felt endless. My reflection stared back at me in the metal doors, eyes wide, hands shaking slightly. When the doors opened onto the rooftop level, the corridor was lit by low night mode lights. Soft, almost dreamlike. I walked toward the studio, saw the soft glow under the door, reached for the handle, pushed it open. She was sitting on a mat near the window, oversized hoodie, bare feet, hair down, no makeup. Her wedding ring was off. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. We looked at each other for a long moment. The diffuser hummed. The city glowed below us through the glass. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for cutting you off like that, for canceling everything, for—" She trailed off. Marcus confronted me, about emotional affairs, about the cameras showing late-night studio sessions. He didn't accuse me of anything physical, but he knew, he could tell. "What did you say?" I told him it was just teaching, just helping an anxious tenant. Her voice cracked slightly. But I was lying. And he knew I was lying, and I panicked. I sat down on a mat across from her. Not too close, just there. "I thought I was the only one who felt like I'd lost something," I said. "You weren't." We sat in silence for a while. Then she gestured to the mats. "Want to practice? One more time? For real?" We rolled out our mats side by side, but instead of standing, she suggested we sit. "Back to back," she said. "It's a grounding exercise. Helps you feel present." I shifted until my back was pressed against hers, her spine against mine. Both of us sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, breathing together. I felt every inhale, every exhale, the warmth of her through our clothes, the slight movement when she adjusted her posture. We stayed like that for a long time. No talking, just breathing. Eventually we stood. She guided me into one final balance pose, stepped close behind me, hands at my sides to steady me. Then, for just a moment, she rested her forehead against my shoulder. Just that. No kiss, no words, just her forehead pressing lightly into the space between my shoulder blade and my neck, and her hands warm on my ribs, and her breath soft against my back. I didn't move. Neither did she. Then she stepped away. We looked at each other. Her eyes were wet. So were mine. "I can't blow up my marriage," she whispered. "Or my career, or your housing. I can't do that to either of us." "I know, but I can't pretend this didn't matter. I know that too." She picked up her wedding ring from where she'd set it on a folded towel, slid it back on. The gold caught the dim light. "Group classes only from now on," she said. "No more private sessions, no more late-night texts. We need boundaries." "Okay." But I'm not asking you to leave, and I'm not disappearing. Okay. She reached out and squeezed my hand once, brief, warm, final. Protect yourself too, she said. Not just me. Dawn was starting to break outside, the city turning from black to gray to gold. I left before the first morning cleaning staff arrived. Nodded hello to the woman pushing a cart down the hallway, like I'd just been working out alone. In the elevator, I caught one last glimpse of Amara through the studio glass. Standing by the window, hands pressed together at her heart. Weeks passed. Life settled into something new, or something old with different edges. I still lived in the building, still took classes, still saw Amara twice a week, sometimes 3 times. But everything was different. She treated me like any other student, professional, polite, encouraging. Except for the small things. She still saved the mat by the window, still let her hand rest on my wrist a fraction longer when she passed me a yoga block. Still gave me a slightly softer smile when she thought no one else was looking. Marcus appeared at the studio less frequently. When he did, he and Amara were civil, professional, distant in a way that made me think I wasn't the only thing broken in their marriage. But I didn't ask. It wasn't my place to know. Mrs. Hawthorne still watched from her balcony, still made comments. But the drama she'd been waiting for never materialized, and eventually she moved on to other gossip. Lena gave me a knowing look sometimes in the lobby, but she never said anything. Gabe texted asking how I was doing. I told him I was fine. He didn't believe me, but he stopped asking. My work got better. I took on new clients, made enough money to actually save a little, renewed my lease without incident, and I kept going to yoga every Tuesday, every Thursday, sometimes Saturday at sunset. I'd walk into that studio and roll out my mat by the window and breathe in citrus and eucalyptus and wait for class to start. Sometimes Amara would walk past me to adjust someone's pose, and her bangles would clink softly, and I'd feel that same tightness in my chest. Sometimes after class we'd exchange a look that held everything we couldn't say, and sometimes I'd catch her watching me in the mirror at the front of the room, and her expression would be unreadable. And I'd wonder if she still thought about the storm night, or the 2 a.m. text, or the moment her forehead rested against my shoulder. But I never asked. We'd chosen the kind of hurt we could live with, the kind that didn't cross the final line, but left us standing right at the edge of it, close enough to feel the drop, but never quite falling. This morning I went to the rooftop at sunrise, like I always do. Unrolled my mat by the window. The same spot, the diffuser humming, the city waking up below me. I tried a balance pose, wobbled after a few seconds, smiled to myself. The class started to fill up. Other tenants arriving, rolling out mats, chatting quietly. Amara walked in exactly on time. Calm, composed. Beautiful in that real, lived-in way that first caught my attention months ago. She glanced around the room. Her eyes found mine for just a second. She gave me a small nod. I nodded back. Class began. She taught the way she always does. Steady voice, gentle corrections, moving between mats. At one point she came near me to adjust another student's shoulder. Her hand brushed my wrist as she passed. Just barely. Just enough. After class, as people rolled up their mats, I lingered by the window for a moment, looked out at the city, felt the sticky mat under my bare feet, heard the soft thud squeak of someone folding their mat nearby, breathed in citrus and eucalyptus. Amara was by the door, thanking people as they left. When I walked past her, she said, "Your balance is getting better." "Good teacher," I said. She smiled, soft, almost sad. "See you Thursday?" "Yeah, Thursday." I stepped into the elevator. The doors slid closed. And I thought about the storm night, the tea on the floor, the back-to-back silence, her forehead against my shoulder. I thought about the mat by the window that's always waiting. I thought about how we're both still here, still orbiting the same space, still pretending we don't feel it every time we're in the same room. She says my balance is getting better, but we both know I'm still only steady when she's the one holding the pose. Would you keep going to that class, or move out?